Okay, so let's move on. We can now step down to Jeff Con 2. We can talk about some of the smaller or still highly significant games that caught our eye. And you two have each put together a list of games that you'd like to quickly discuss. Now, some of these games we can't sort of expand out into full DF2X segments because, let's face facts, there was very little shown. Very, very little. John, let's start with your list, which is, a few interesting titles here. Let's kick off with Ninja Gaiden Ragebound, which you're very excited about, and having seen the last third of the trailer that they put
Yes.
out. Two-thirds of the trailer is just like completely irrelevant to the gameplay, but the last third is indeed looking awesome, right?
Yeah, exactly. So they actually show a good amount of gameplay in the last third of the trailer. And like, on paper, the idea of like, oh, Ninja Gaiden with the Rage Bound and Metroidvania, those types of things going together, that doesn't actually excite me. But when you actually see it being played, the visual design, knowing that it's the team behind Blasphemous, which is an excellent game, those two actually, uh, then it gets exciting. We haven't had a 2D Ninja Gaiden game in a very long time, and what they're showing here just looks fan freaking tastic. As
Yep.
far as pixel art goes, like the thing about pixel art is like I'm not of the belief that like it's an inherently retro thing to do. Uh, there are ways to make your game look old and retro, but I think that this is not one of those cases. This is clearly a case where they're utilizing pixel art as like essentially their medium. It's their canvas to create some really striking two-dimensional art that has a lot, like, you can tell that a ton of work was poured into getting all the shading and lighting right on all the tiles and generate everything in just the right way, that it has this like beautiful look that's very, very just attractive, pulls you in. Blasphemous was also great in that regard, so I'm not too surprised given the pedigree there. But on top of that, everything just looks smooth and fast and slick, and I, of course, I'm excited to play it. So really
Hmm.
happy to see this partnership happening, and we've seen a lot of great stuff from these partnerships between Japanese companies and like new Western like indie teams that have sort of tackled it. I mean, that's where how we got stuff like Sonic Mania, Streets of Rage 4, and the like. Uh, so next year we should get Ninja Gaiden Ragebound and the new Shinobi, hopefully, from
Wow.
the Streets of Rage 4 guys. So it's going to be two Ninja games back to back. Exciting.
Hmm. And yeah, this looks really fantastic. Project Robot from Gen Design.
I would say Gen Design
Okay.
probably. So Ueda-san and his team, obviously the legacy here being Shadow of the Colossus, Eco, Last Guardian. This looks like another, like essentially a new take on that. It's their latest game, and instantly the footage they show, which I would very much believe is captured from whatever they're developing as far as like actual game footage made to look cinematic, because it shows very similar sort of climbing mechanics that we saw and stuff like Shadow of the Colossus. Only there's sort of a sci-fi twist where your character's scrambling to climb this very large robot as a timer's counting down, and clearly a cataclysmic event is about to occur, and then he sort of flies away as everything gets engulfed by it. He flies away in the head specifically, and it's just as you would expect from these guys. Like just the music, the visual design, the art, the concept. It's otherworldly, and it's just very, very striking. And
Yeah.
because of what they've done in the past, I'm willing to like. I'm always willing to listen, and I'm always willing to see like what they're going to do next. And I really hope that this delivers on that front.
Hmm.
And I hope it doesn't
Yeah.
take as long to make as The Last Guardian, which I gather was somewhat limited by the fact that they were trying to do this like crazy, like collision in physics between the two characters on a PS triple at first, which I don't think
Yeah.
the PS triple was really designed to do, if you will. So that's exciting. After that, then we got to mention that Sega had a Virtua Fighter Direct, but at the Game Awards, they actually announced the arrival of a new Virtua Fighter project.
Yeah.
And most of the trailers, sort of the it's like these slow camera angles showing a battle happening around you, sort of setting the stage for what they want to achieve. But at the very end, they kind of show what looks like actual gameplay, fighting in that city street. And if that is indeed indicative of what they're doing, I think it's very promising, because there's a physicality to the characters and the way they move in 3D. Obviously with fighting games, the response and the control, getting that to feel right is difficult. And as a result, you often get like sort of like a bit of clipping through characters. It's like these animations play out, and the way that the other character reacts to the hits, it feels very kind of canned, if you will, and doesn't respond in the way that it actually might. Here, it seems like they might be trying to take that further. Like when legs and arms and torsos, everything sort of connects, it feels like there's much more weight and actual physicality to it. And knowing Virtua Fighter's roots, that's an interesting idea, is to try to make this more visceral and more realistic, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. Those last few seconds of the trailer are tantalizing, I'd say. I think it looks absolutely awesome. I'll tell you what I think about this, John, because obviously Virtua Fighter, Virtua Fighter 2, Virtua Fighter 3, those games had such a profound impact on me as a games player and as a journalist when they actually arrived, because they were like awesome to play. They were groundbreaking in gameplay terms. And technologically, they were amazing. And 4 and 5, I was less taken with, because they're great games, of course, but there wasn't that technological leap associated with them, I'd venture to suggest. But just that little teaser at the end, it just looked fantastic. It looked like what I'd want from a next generation Virtua Fighter. Maybe it's just a tease, I don't know, but wow, looks awesome.
Watching the direct, though, and listening to them talk, it really sounds like they've put a lot of effort into thinking about, like, what does Virtua Fighter mean today? What can we do with it that's special? They clearly are taking this very seriously, and I actually think the stuff prior to what looks like game footage maybe sort of tips its hand in terms of what they're thinking. Like when they show them fighting, the stones rumbling, and you see the reflection in the glass and everything sort of reacting. To me, that says that what they're thinking about is interaction and like environmental like impact, not in the Dead or Alive way where it's these scripted things happening, but more like things around you and the characters themselves have much more of an impact in terms of weightiness, physicality to them. So I'm very curious to see what actually happens here. But
it's interesting because if you go back to VF3, there was actually some pushback about stuff like the undulating terrain and stuff, which basically disappeared in the following games.
Yeah, sadly.
And there's always this balance between pushing technology and getting the core gameplay mechanics right. And they kind of shifted the balance to gameplay, which is entirely understandable. But for me, it was like, well, when I want to see a brand new Virtua Fighter game, I want to be wowed with something I've never seen before, which was kind of what VF 1, 2, and 3 did for me. And hopefully it will be the same with this one. Who knows? What's next on your list then?
Next up on the list then is, also from Ryuga Gotoku Studio. It's the Project Century, which seems to be sort of a take on the Like a Dragon series, but set, however, like 100 years in the past, I guess. It's an old time take on it. But the big thing here is that the way that they seem to initiate combat and the way they showed that is also quite a bit different, in that it just sort of seemed to happen seamlessly on the map rather than like as a separate battle sequence. So I'm curious what that means for it. I mean, the whole aesthetic there, I think, is really cool. I'm obviously excited for it, but it also just makes me think of like how incredible the output of RGG Studio really is when you really get right down to it, right? Like these guys, like most game studios, you're like, man, I wish they would release more games, where these guys are like, whoa, slow down a bit, guys. Like, I can't keep up with your output. That's where we're at with these guys. They're able to produce, they found a way to make these very compelling games, but do so in a way that's economical and fast.
I was about to say that, after Oliver, they're the hardest working people in the games industry.
It's honestly insane what they've managed to achieve here. and yeah, it's just so I'm eager. I'm always happy to follow these guys and see what they do next. So this is definitely another one to keep an eye on. And yeah, they like to do these sort of spin-off games, but it really is that new physicality with the combat that really has me intrigued, because they've not had combat that looks like what they show in this trailer before. So
Absolutely. And
that's cool.
Alex isn't here today, which is a shame because we're talking about Turok. It's back.
Yeah, I'm wondering if what he'll think of this. Obviously these guys, Saber knows what's up. They know what they're doing. But this is like a proper Turok reboot thing, and it seems to be a third-person action game. The big question I have is like, what sort of game is this going to be? Because what we liked about Turok specifically, I think, is that it was sort of a not, well, how would I say it? A search action game, a non-linear exploration based action game. When they rebooted in 2008, it just became a very linear thing that wasn't nearly as compelling, I would say. So what are they doing with this? I will say I like the visual design. I think it actually does look cool, and I'm curious to see where it goes. It just doesn't seem to bear much resemblance to the older games, but hey, that's okay. I'm curious either way. I like where they're going with it. The last two, just to very quickly mention, because there's really not much to see. We got announcements from Capcom. We got a new Onimusha coming in 2026, apparently, which, it beat Dino Crisis to the punch. And I think it's freaking phenomenal that they're actually bringing Onimusha back, because this was a hot series during the PS2 era, right? They made 4 of them, and more like it's kind of like a weird follow up to Power Stone, but Onimusha, if you remember,
Right.
Gaiden, it was called. And then there was even a tactics game on GBA. Like, there was a lot of Onimusha happening, and then it just was like gone. It just disappeared. They never did anything with it for years and years and years. Here, though, visually, this, in the trailer that they showed, it's like, okay, yeah, this is clearly more RE engine goodness. It has all the trademark visual flair of Unreal, or sorry, I said Unreal, RE engine. You can't spell Unreal without RE though. It's in there, right? But this looks good, so I'm happy they're bringing that back. But what they showed less of was a new Okami game. So Kamiya-san is back at Capcom, and what feels like a big slight to Platinum in a way is they've sort of restarted Clover as Clovers, plural.
Right.
And he's doing it. So I think Kamiya-san has always had clearly a very big soft spot for Okami. And I think it's great that he's getting a chance to take another crack at it. And I will be very curious to see what it becomes, given how much time has passed since the original and what they've kind of learned since that. So, yeah, that's just some of the ones that stood out to me.